Hi, afternoon everybody. Thanks for coming. So yes, as Greg says, we've got quite a strong partnership with GDOT at the moment. The Gauteng Biodiversity Stewardship Program is a collaboration between GDOT, the EWT, and WWF Green Trust, Nedbank Green Trust. So there are some of the team members, most of which are actually here. And hopefully next year GDOT will be up here doing the presentation, but for today they've kindly offered to take any questions you may have for me. So the overall goal of the project was to build a working model for biodiversity stewardship in Gauteng that achieves the protected area expansion targets, but also and mainly improves the institutional capacity for biodiversity stewardship implementation. Our objectives were to better understand the current and potential future landscape of Gauteng, strengthen the capacity, and identify sustainable mechanisms for biodiversity stewardship in the province going forward. So the project target was to achieve the intent to declare at least 5,000 hectares, which is going to be the catalytic foundation for the target of 30,000 by 2019 that GDOT set. So just briefly, our site selection process was to select properties that contained critical biodiversity areas according to the Gauteng Sea Plan, and which fell within the National Protected Area Expansion Strategy, as well as the Gauteng one. We then just verified, Gauteng is rapidly transforming, so we had to make sure that those sites were not already transformed. And then we prioritized the sites according to a scoring system ranking biodiversity and social criteria. And then we engaged with landowners to determine the willingness going forward. So just very briefly, some of our stewardship sites. We have focused on 6 primary priority sites, making up around 12,000 hectares, 7.7 approximately of which is untransformed. We've conducted 6 site assessments and taken these through the review panel process to come to the conclusion that 3 of them we will be offering nature reserve status, 2 of which have already agreed, and then 3 protected environments. We then have 30 secondary sites on our list, which make up around 44,000 hectares. So our first proposed protected environment in Tshwane is quite a small property. It's 1,900 hectares, majority of which is untransformed. It's got class 1 ridges and a diversity of habitats and ecological processes. However, there is a land claim on the property, and that put us on pause for a while until we had kind of engaged with the Department of Land Reform and kind of come to an agreement with them about when we can proceed and when we can't. And I'll talk to that a bit just now. And then our proposed nature reserve in Tshwane is quite incredible. You probably won't believe that it's in Gauteng when you see those pictures. But, so that's around 2.2 thousand hectares, 18 of which is untransformed. Lots of red listed species, including a critically endangered cycad, southern bald ibis. We've had confirmed presence of oribi and suitable habitat for a variety of other red listed species. Then we have a proposed protected environment in Devon, which is made up of a number of properties and landowners, which we were quite tentative to approach at first. But fortunately, BirdLife South Africa had been in the area because it is a registered important bird area, and they assisted with the facilitation of that relationship. So it's an incredible birding area. Lots of red-listed species have been confirmed, and it's got Soweto high-veld grassland, which is endangered. So, however, we did also come across a little bit of a snag there with the prospecting application, and we strongly suspect that this isn't the last one we're going to have to address, but we will take them on as they come. Then I'm going to focus a bit more on this site because we've come the furthest with it. It's a proposed nature reserve in Midvaal, so it's just north of the Vaal Dam. And so it's around 1,700 hectares with around 1,100 untransformed. It has red-listed species confirmed, and it's got a diverse array of habitat for that's suitable for other red-list species. It's also got incredible protected area expansion potential, which I'll show you briefly just now. So we conducted the site assessment, we put it through the review panel process, and then offered it nature reserve, which they readily accepted. And so the legal contracts have been completed and negotiated, which was quite an important process for our program, because that sort of institutional knowledge, well, you know, and procedures were not in place, and so it's quite a hurdle to get over to put them all there. We're now busy compiling the environmental management plan, mapping of trails, infrastructure, alien vegetation, and all of that. We then decided that because it was our first site, and the landowner was tentative to even meet with us in the beginning, but he got more and more involved in the process and curious, and he kind of, we got the feeling that he really wanted to know a lot about his veld condition and what he could do with it, you know, to improve it. Not just for his cattle, but for you know, they have a small sort of hiking trail network and that sort of thing. So, and he is very conservation minded. So we contracted a veld management consultant who did 4 site assessments, and then developed management recommendations for veld and fire management. Now, this was quite an achievement, because when we first met with the landowner, he said, no fire, ever, will come near my property, unless it's, you know, little fire breaks that I'm making. We will never burn my veld. And after the management consultant went through the whole process with him, explained to him, demonstrated to him exactly what it would do for his veld condition, he's on board, which was really great. He then requested that we do a training session with him and perhaps a couple of neighboring landowners to get them on board, to do a kind of a session where we go out and do the site assessment and maybe show them how to identify a few key grass species for the area. So, as I was saying, there is potential expansion of the nature reserve. So this was our 4th site. These are our other 2. So you can see that there's one just north of the property of 510 hectares, and then northwest of 685. So we did assess these, and the 510 hectare one was approved to offer nature reserve status, because his land is predominantly untransformed. He doesn't derive a livelihood from the land. He does have cattle there, but he's got a business elsewhere. Whereas the one on the 685 hectare one, you can see is quite transformed. Only around half of it is still intact, and he has an abattoir on site, and so we eventually decided that we would offer him protected environment status. He hasn't yet agreed. We're still in conversation with him. So as you can see, that will then, and this area here is actually the Vaal Dam Nature Reserve. So we have now extended that nature reserve by 1,600 hectares, and then perhaps a little bit more if he agrees. And then there's also potential future protected area expansion with the landowners to the north. We haven't engaged with them yet, but the landowners we have are quite optimistic that they would agree. So just to run through our progress, we definitely have gained a better understanding of the landscape. We've developed good relationships with landowners, farmers' unions, larger member organizations such as AgriSA, Dr. DLR, which is the Department of Land Reform. We have an improved understanding of landowners' wants and needs, and we have made contact, as I said, with Dr. DLR, and better understand the land reform processes and where we can kind of go forward and where we need to hold back. And then also, obviously, a much more comprehensive idea of the condition and status of land with high conservation value. We've definitely strengthened the capacity within GDOD. We've done a variety of training interventions and a lot of trial by fire, and our team is really quite strong and effective now. Our scientific services unit, I say our, GDOD scientific services unit, has been hugely supportive and present at training events here, and have learned a lot too, I think, and that's great because we know now that taking the process forward, there's that capacity in place. Then we had quite a successful sustainable funding workshop in May, and the outcome was that we need to investigate what funding sources would be most suitable and obtainable for the GBSP. It was very clear that we need to start speaking the right language and consider the priorities of our different audiences. We need to be able to measure, provide measurable outputs and, of our impacts and mark in the landscape. And then we need to also revisit the budget and be very sure of what we need going forward. Then progress against our target of 5,000 hectares. Currently, we have a potential of approximately 7.7 of untransformed habitat. However, we are looking into more sites just to guarantee that we reach that target. And then we also won the 2017 Greening the Future Awards this year. Briefly, lessons learned was the adaptation of the process for Gauteng allowed us to really interrogate its robustness. The Gauteng landscape requires a little bit more flexibility, felt condition. Landowners aren't always easy to find because they don't necessarily derive their livelihoods off that land or live there. Check the land claim status before we put quite a lot of work into the property. As I said, we met with the Department of Rural Development and determined when we can proceed, whether it's being gazetted, we need to hold off, and non-gazetted, we can kind of investigate further. Confirm farm portion ownership and accuracy early on with the Surveyor General. Expand our ideas of extension services to ensure the sustainability, whether it be accreditation schemes, assistance with agricultural aspects and not just conservation management, training of staff, what does each farmer need or want? And we've learned that attention to detail and maintaining momentum is key to demonstrate our investment to landowners. And they have given us this feedback saying, we really appreciated you coming back so quickly, responding. It showed that you were invested in the process. And then as I said, we need to identify measurable indicators of the success and impact of the project and tailor our messages for our audience. So market the program effectively for funders and landowners. There was an article going around Facebook last week by George Monbiot, and he was saying how our conservation language is not effective. We're not reaching our audiences because we use terms like biodiversity stewardship and natural resources and protected areas, and we get that kind of expression from people a lot of the time. So perhaps we should start using guardianship or wildlife variety, natural life support systems, wilderness working, a living planet, that sort of thing. Maybe we need to start kind of trying to change how we speak. As he said, we're blessed with a wealth of nature and a wealth of language. Let us bring them together and use one to defend the other. And I challenge you all to come up with some new terms, maybe write them on the board outside, bring them to me. Let's see what we can come up with. So just taking this forward, we'll proceed with our current sites. We're going to identify additional sites and funding mechanisms. We're going to learn some of those languages so we can speak to our audiences. Investigate opportunities to improve extension services for proclaimed sites, establish a working group, and explore government-owned and land reform sites in Gauteng. So we'd just like to thank our funders, the WWF Netback Green Trust, for their constant support, and I'd like to thank GDOD for their commitment and hard work for the last 2.5 years. Thank you.